Hello and welcome. Let's talk tabletop. Today's topic or question comes from Nebclecce or Nebclecce, however you pronounce that. It's how do you feel about homebrew and when is it too far? Now, homebrew, first of all define it. Homebrew, strictly speaking, in tabletop games is anything that is not in a book, which is kind of a broad category, or in some cases, anything that's not in an official book. Like if it was D&D, if you had a D&D supplement that wasn't published by Wizards of the Coast, that's technically homebrew. Like the Book of Erotic Fantasy, for example, is not a D&D product, but it was made as a supplement for D&D. So, how do I feel about homebrew and when is it too far? Well, anymore and nowadays, it's hard to run a campaign or a D&D game without having at least some form of homebrew, some form of table rules, some form of something that's not strictly speaking in the books. Like, none of these D&D books, like if you sit at my table in 99% of the campaigns that I run, one of the things I'm going to tell you is, hey, in this setting, necromancy is illegal. It's dark magic. If people see you doing it, they're going to report you to the guards. You know, if you bring somebody back to life as your skeleton slave, paladins are going to come out of the woodwork and either kill or arrest you. You know, because it's fucking necromancy. You can't justify it and be in the lawful good area of the alignment chart. And that, strictly speaking, is a homebrew rule. You might have DMs that are just fine with that. You think, yeah, necromancy, do whatever you want. And nobody bats an eyelash. But in my opinion, if you had a strong, like morally upright civilization or society or village or town or city or whatever that abides by a relatively relatable set of laws, I'm sure they would probably frown upon you walking into a graveyard, raising their dead relatives as minions, and walking off with them. They'd probably want to kill you or hang you or throw you in jail forever for tampering with the dead. So, you know, the homebrew at my table is necromancy is illegal. I don't stop you from doing it, but if anybody sees you, and I mean anybody, they're gonna report you to somebody. So, that is the risk you take at my table in terms of homebrew if you want to use dark magic, because it's dark magic. So that would be an example of a kind of a light-handed homebrew, because necromancy is one of the 8 schools, I think, one of the 8 schools of magic, and you know that's only for magic users, and it's only for people that want to participate in that 15% of all the schools of magic. And yes, I do keep that chart in front of me of all the spells that are technically necromancy, and I'm always on the lookout. I've got that eagle eye for any of my spellcasters, players that cast a necromantic spell in front of any NPCs, and if they recognize it as necromancy. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. That's homebrew at my table, and that's what I would consider like light homebrew. Now, there is like a chart, or a spectrum, I guess is the right word, where there's like light homebrew, there's medium homebrew, and then there's heavy homebrew. So, if necromancy being illegal, frowned upon, and will probably get you arrested or killed, is light homebrew, what do we get as we move down the chart, in my opinion? There's things like item creation, like items that are not in those books, like the Eternal Shield, the shield that cannot be damaged or broken. It's not better than any other shield, it just can't be damaged or broken or burnt or scorched with acid or anything like that. It's not in any of those books. Or I'm very good at making shields. I don't know why. We had something called the lion face shield, where if you were holding it and a melee weapon, if somebody attacked you in melee and missed, it would deal a d6 of damage because the lion on the front would like bite them. You know, that's not in any of those books, so that's technically homebrew. So making up your own items and keeping them balanced can be a big responsibility, but unless you like really go for it for something like stupid, powerful, or outrageous, it doesn't tend to get out of hand, but it's very easy to get out of hand. Like, I had a coworker recently, same guy with the bad breath that I was telling you about a couple episodes ago, who was very into D&D, but he was kind of my polar opposite. Because he loved 5th edition, he loved 4th edition, and he was heavy, heavy, heavy into that homebrew. Because he was all about making like 9 legendary swords that do all these different things, and he had to have like 5 or 6 wizard towers, and no, he didn't want to look in any of the books, and his wife had a special class that he just made up to make it more powerful and stuff. Like, he was flying by the seat of his pants. Like, I'd be shocked if his books didn't have dust on them. But like, if you want to make legendary stuff, that's fine, but it also means that once you hand it to your players, they're not going to ever replace it. Like, when we ran, gosh, what was it? The 12 Trees campaign, where they got like the 12 magic rings. One of those rings was called the Ring of Bladed Light. And the Ring of Bladed Light was exactly what it sounds like. It would summon like a lightsaber for you. And that bladed light, or lightsaber, because that's what it was, that lightsaber was like a 3d8 weapon. It was obscenely powerful. Because like a longsword is a d8, isn't it? Yeah, I think it is. And a 3d8 from a magic ring? Holy crap. But part of the payoff for that was that it took up a ring slot. So not only was it a weapon, but it took up one of your ring slots, and you only get 2 of those. So that was part of the payment, but still it was kind of an absurd weapon. And once our paladin got a hold of that, he never used any of his other weapons, hardly, other than like his paladin magic. He would always say, okay, I pull the sword of bladed light, or the ring of bladed light, and I turn it and I summon the lightsaber, or whatever he was calling it. That was probably a little too powerful for like the level of D&D they were playing, but that's medium homebrew. When you're making up your own items, your own statted circumstances. And then there's heavy homebrew, where you kind of just like, you make something out of nothing, and then you try to bring it, or at least try, in many people's cases, try to bring it into balance with everything else. This is when you make up your own races, you make up your own classes, things that are kind of big and complicated, and you need like 10 or 12 people to look at it and say, does this look balanced to you? You know, does this look interesting to you? Does it, I'm making up my own sub-race of like glass-hided lizard people from under the mountain. Does this look like a race, or does this look like something like a piece of garbage? And then, most of them will say, is this like a homebrew thing? And then they don't take it seriously, because people that make up all these different races and all these different things are either A, doing it for min-maxing, because of course, or B, there's probably something very similar somewhere in one of these books, but they want to tweak that one thing to make it more powerful, or to tweak that one thing to make it more particular. And I'm always wary when people come to me with homebrew races or with unusual races at the table. It's like, there's the core races, humans, half-elves, elves, dwarves, orcs, halflings, gnomes. Some people say tieflings. I don't really think so. But the core races, and then when you start reaching for exotic stuff, I look at your character sheet a lot more closely. Because like if you want to play a Minotaur, I want to know why. And the answer is usually because they want to be a charge fighter. You know, the guy that runs straight into battle, because Minotaurs have the charge and gore attack. So it's not only for that, but they can use their horns, and they're big and strong and tough. It's usually because they want to min-max something. So making up people that make up their own races and then bring them to their DM, you know, does this look balanced? I will almost always automatically say no. And then again, there are classes, and you know, if you're in 3.5, there's so many classes, dozens and dozens and dozens. I don't remember where I saw it. There was this like triangle pyramid thing that had like fighter on one corner and wizard on one corner, and then I think rogue or something on the top corner, and it was broken into like dozens and dozens of triangles, and they all had like the names of different classes in them. So if it's something that's like a warrior, it's closer to this corner. If it's something that's like a wizard, you know, like a sorcerer or something, it's on this corner. You know, halfway between the rogue and the wizard is the arcane trickster, but there's a bunch of shades of gray between that. And, you know, there's so many classes, especially in 3.5, that making up another class, it's really hard to do and to keep it balanced, because, like, the fighter enjoys the constantly increasing, you know, base attack bonus. You know, wizards enjoy being able to cast the high-end spells. Rogues enjoy being able to have all the skill points, etc., etc. So what combination of those things are you making, and why is there nothing that fits this already? Because, again, there are dozens and dozens of classes. Can you not be this instead? Or can you not be this instead? You know, what is it about this class? You know, I always get suspicious. I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm a pessimist. But yes, making up your own race or making up your own class, in my opinion, is heavy homebrew. And some DMs, myself included, just don't allow them. They just say, hey, these are the races you're allowed to have. You know, don't bring me anything you built. You know, this is my world or my setting or my campaign, and this doesn't exist there. You know, you want to be a ninja? Hey, there's a ninja class, or there's an assassin class. You can be a rogue. You know, if you want to use illusion Naruto magic, you know, there's the arcane trickster for stuff like that. Or if you want to be a sorcerer who's related to a dragon, that's exactly what the draconic bloodline is. And the Draconomicon is full of classes that have dragon patrons. If you want to be affiliated with a certain color of dragon or a certain world-famous dragon that's sitting somewhere in your DM's lore, chances are it's already been made up and correctly balanced for the most part. Until you jump into the psionics books, in which case everything went batshit crazy. But that's why there's so many 3.5 books, is because they don't all line up. And just as an aside, whenever we played 3.5, the first question out of everybody's mouth was, do we use the psionics books? And the answer was always no. It didn't matter who was DMing. Just no, leave it out. And because like at my table, it'd be like, okay, core books, all the completes, you know, complete warrior, complete scoundrel, etc., etc., and the book, the equipment book, whatever it was called, I don't remember. The magic item compendium, that's what it is. You can use any of those, and that's plenty of books. You know, because if you're delving off into all these other crazy things, because there's way too many 3.5 books, that was actually one of the problems that edition had, was there were like fucking 85 books full of classes and feats and shopping lists, and there was so much there that when I was in Gamers Guild at WKU, we actually started limiting which books. We actually had one DM that was like, okay, core books, the completes, and then you can pick one other book, and the party had to agree on what book they wanted, and whether it be the Magic Item Compendium or Unearthed Arcana or something. It was something they had to agree on, so they would all probably take something out of it. So if you were running a desert campaign, yeah, you would want the core books, the completes, and Sandstorm, because Sandstorm was the book that had all the desert shit in it, so that was to your advantage. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. What else? As far as homebrew goes, there's even things like low magic settings. You know, what does that mean? I mean, technically, in my opinion, Lord of the Rings is a low magic setting. You know why? Because there's only like 7 wizards in the entire world. You know, the Sword of the King, I forget what it's called. The only thing that's special about it is that it has ghost touch on it. And that's not going to help you in a regular battle. Or at least according to the movies, it had ghost touch on it. But, you know, there's a ring, and when a hobbit wears it, they can turn invisible, because hobbits already know how to go unseen, and that's just the next level of power that they could achieve. Or a king, a man, a human man that wears it, who is a king, will be a mightier ruler than ever before if he wears the ring. It was a conduit for whatever core ability you've got. Or, you know, Gandalf's staff just had a light on it, and he could talk to insects and do all these little things. But he was more there to be a guide than a fireball slinging kind of... Anyway, I'm not going to delve too far into Lord of the Rings, but in my opinion, Lord of the Rings is a low magic setting. Now, what is low magic, for those that don't know? Low magic means that your DM puts a cap on how much magic you can learn. Like, you know, magic level 1 through level 10, according to like a wizard, if you were going to level a wizard. You know, on average, a level 2 wizard will know first level magic. A level 4 wizard will know second level magic. A level 6 wizard will learn level 3, all the way up to level 20, when you will learn 10th level magic, and that's without modifiers and feats and all that crap. So on average, a 20th level wizard knows 10th level magic. That's where it stops. That's where it caps off. But there are certain campaign settings, like if you learn a certain level of magic in Dragonlance, the gods will take notice and they will banish you from the material plane automatically. There's no roll, there's no save, there's no conversation. You're gone. You have become too powerful. Because the last guy that did that, Riceland, learned a little too much magic, and he started kind of upsetting the world. So all the gods got together and they were like, okay, if anybody gets that strong again, we're just going to get rid of them. And they all agreed on this. So, Dragonlance, wizards, beware. If you become as powerful as Riceland, you will be banished to another plane of existence, if not erased, if not killed, if not banished to some place where you will never be heard from again because you have become too powerful. But a low magic setting, most of the ones I see are capped at level 5. I don't know why level 5, because that's already allowing for Lightning Bolt and Fireball and a bunch of the other staple spells. But a bunch of people will be like, okay, the highest level magic in the whole world is 5th level magic. And, you know, if you would have learned magic higher than that, you can just learn more spells that are like 5 on down. Which is completely fair. You get more tools, just not more powerful tools. And nobody else out there has more powerful tools either, because it's a low magic setting. That rule applies to everybody. Part of it, I think, was to keep wizards and fighters a little more balanced, because, you know, fighters are squared and wizards are quadratic, because in the later levels, you know, wizards would just become so powerful that there's no reason to have a fighter in the party, because the wizard's just going to sling the 10d6 fireball and the fighter's just going to sit there feeling useless. But That's why wizards suffer through the early levels. They're so underpowered, they have so little HP, but as soon as they get that fireball, suddenly they're dangerous, but they earned that by sucking through the early levels. But a low magic setting puts a curb on their power curve, maybe to keep things a little more in balance. So they learn more spells, but not more powerful spells, so it keeps them kind of on the same plane with their other party members. Now, is that light homebrew? Is that medium homebrew? Is that heavy homebrew? That's kind of up to the beholder, because if that's the way the whole setting is, nobody, not the big bad, not anybody you're ever going to run into is ever going to have higher than 5th level magic, well, you become more of a utility character than you do like a fireball slinging, I'm gonna freaking cast the wish spell kind of character class, and that might affect it. You say, hey, it's a low magic setting, okay, well, I'm not gonna bother to be a wizard. It actually can change your perspective on what class you should pick. What else as far as homebrew? There's even things like changing the way skills work. Like when I was running Goddess Wheel way back in the day at Gamers Guild, the first thing I told my players was, okay, pull up your character sheet, get like a black marker, and swipe out swimming. This is a desert campaign. There's no water anywhere that's deep enough. You're never going to be in a river or a waterfall, a pond, no ocean, no nothing. Just swipe swimming off your skills because you don't know how to swim, and there's nobody around to teach you, and there's no place where it's going to be necessary. So there's stuff that just erase certain parts of your character sheet because it's never going to come up. That's kind of a homebrew. Or, what was that campaign? The Apocalypse Stone, way back in the day. Like if you delivered, if you remember Noah Antwiler's video, he was talking about the Apocalypse Stone, where if you remove it from the castle where it lays, all of it kind of like holds the cosmic cheeseburger together. It's the toothpick that holds the cheeseburger together. So when you pull it out of the castle in whence it rests, the material plane and all of the other planes drift apart. So, heaven, hell, the elemental planes, the planes of chaos, the planes of law, etc., they literally drift apart from each other in some metaphysical sense. So, magic, like holy magic, for example, becomes weaker and weaker and weaker to the point where it's not worth playing somebody who can cast holy magic. That's an interesting, that's actually in a book, so it's not homebrew, but that's something interesting. If for some reason heaven was drifting away from the earth and holy magic was getting weaker and weaker, that'd be a really interesting campaign stipulation. But going back to the original question, after all my examples, how do I feel about homebrew and when is it too far? Homebrew is excellent because it can flavor a campaign, whether that be laws like necromancy is illegal, or putting in items that aren't in any of the books so they make for very special occurrences, like the perfect dagger that we had. Is like the perfect dagger cannot miss, but it only does 1 damage. And that sounds completely dinky until you run into somebody who works with poisons or numbing agents, or any kind of stuff you can like spread on your blade. You can't miss. There, you're poisoned. It's the perfect dagger. So like creative stuff like that. And then the heavy stuff is races and classes, which honestly I don't really allow very much because it invites too many balancing questions and too many weird things. Like, I understand if you're running the game, if it's your campaign setting, if it's your story, whatever, yeah, you can make up all the races and stuff you want to do because it's your world. You made it. There could be like tadpole people running around trying to make peace with the Murlocs from World of Warcraft who are at war with the farmers in freaking Hillsbrad and junk like that. But in my opinion, making up your own race, making up your own class is probably too much, because chances are it's either already in a book under a different name, or it was built for some form of min-maxing, and that makes me really suspicious of the player. Because, 50, 60, 80 people that were in Gamers Guild, we had some power gamers, we had some munchkins, and you had to look out for them, and you had to be suspicious of them, because they were always looking to do, just one more point of damage, or to have just one more point of armor class, or whatever. You had to watch them, because they wanted to get away with anything that they could. And, bringing in a homebrew race, I always ask, okay, why? What class are you playing with this thing that you so creatively made up? And the answer is never good. It's just not. So how do I feel about homebrew? I think it's great as a seasoning. I don't think it's great as a mix. So, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about that. I mean, I think the necromancy is illegal thing is like the main thing that I use as far as homebrew, and that just kind of makes sense to me. But I don't do a whole ton of home brewing because I'm not smart enough to balance things correctly, like the Sword of Bladed Light. It's a 3d8 long sword that's a blade of solid light that lives in a ring that's stronger than anything else you're ever going to come across in the campaign. I don't make up weapons and I don't make up classes or races because I'm not smart enough to do that and balance them correctly. And 90% of the people that I run into that make up their own races and classes are just doing it to munchkin something, and when I find out, I get pissy. So, take from that what you will. That's just my opinion. So, thank you, Nebclecce, for your question, for your topic, and I'll see you guys soon. So, until next time, keep gaming.